Obviously, I'm not going to talk about what's going on is what's going on, but I think anytime, I'll talk more about the Shabbos day, but I think anytime you're dealing with a matzav like this, Achdus and Shalom should be a focus. So instead of just talking about Achdus and Shalom, I thought an appropriate, I didn't make enough copies, I apologize. I thought of an appropriate way to go about this is my brother, I asked him permission, I don't know if he knew I was going to give a shir, but my brother a couple of years ago wrote a sefer on the Torah of Tzaddik. Never printed it, but I have it. So I decided, let's learn it. I don't know if we'll go through it straight. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But to explain the depth of the soul of every Jew. And Yossi, he does a very good job. So we'll run through it together. Pasha will run through it, and we'll see. Maybe this will become a series that we'll go through Keseder every week. It's a cheshbon, it's long, and it's in detail, but I think it's very important. In just talking about, love a fellow Jew, you have to know what is a Jew. And what's the depth of every Jew, regardless of their actions. That's Pnimius Halev. This is a big yisai from Rav Tzaddik. So let's go through this. It says like this: Ki shetziva Kadosh Baruch Hu es Avram Avinu. This is the beginning of the Sefer. When Hashem commanded Avram al mitzvah Milah, when Hashem commanded Avram Avinu on the first mitzvah, mitzvah Milah, Amar la Yisbarach, Hashem said, Va'ata es brisi tishmar. Should be careful with my bris. The first page has about ois bris, right? Ois Milah, ois tefillin. So the pasuk says that you should be careful with my bris. That every child should have a bris milah. This is the bris between me and your children. Everyone should have a bris milah. And the mitzvah of bris milah will be an ois, will be a sign for me and you. It's the first paragraph on the right side. Hare, so you see, shabris milah nikra ois. That the mitzvah of bris milah, and you'll see, the bris milah doesn't necessarily just mean bris milah. It applies to women as well. But the mitzvah of bris milah, and what it symbolizes, is called an ois. It's called a sign. Hanechtemes al gufay shel Yisrael. That is a seal on the body of a Jew. So you find that the mitzvah of bris milah is called an ois. Hare v'chein matzinu mitzvah tefillin. We also find there's another mitzvah, but don't worry, it applies to the side of the room too. Again, not bepoil, but you'll see. We also find that there's another mitzvah that's also called an ois. K'dichsiv, it's tefillin, kshartem la'ois al yadecha. Harei shebechol yom v'yom yeshnei oises al kol ish Yisrael. Every male has two oisim. You have the bris milah and the ois of tefillin. V'hein ois bris milah v'ois tefillin. You have two mitzvahs that are called a sign. The sign of tefillin and the sign of bris milah. The Aruch HaShulchan even says lahalacha v'yesh mehakadmoinim shekasvu shekol adam tzarech liyos alav shnei oises. The Aruch HaShulchan used to say lahalacha, every man every day has to have two oisim. You have bris milah and you have tefillin. Dal pi shnayim edim yakim davar. An ois is like a testimony, and you need two edim to testify you're a Jew. V'lochein b'chol have a milu tefillin. So you have these two mitzvahs that are called ois, and what do they symbolize? What is the meaning of the ois of bris milah and the ois of tefillin? And what makes them so special that they're called the signs of a Jew? Like I said, it goes without saying that those mitzvahs, the women are mekayim that inyan without mitzvahs bepoil. So what do they symbolize? What's the difference between tefillin and a bris milah? That's question number one. So my brother pointed out, in the world of Reb Tzaddik, this concept of tefillin and bris milah and the differences between these two is a huge yisod. Hundreds of pages. Mamish just on this yisod. Let's add one more Gemara, and then we'll start getting into the depth. A lot of today, I think we've touched on, because if you're here long enough, you've heard this yisod, but to go through it well, it's important. The Gemara says like this. This is a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. Poishe Yisrael begufan, u'poishe u'masayim begufan. Yardin legehenim and v'nida ba'yud beis chodesh. The Gemara talks about that bad Jews that sin and goyim that sin go to Gehenna. Okay, fine. Not for now. The main point is the end of the Gemara. The Gemara says, Poishe Yisrael begufan ma'inu. What's an example of a Jew that's a sinner? So, Amarav, karkafta d'loi monach tefillin. A head that does not wear tefillin. The example of a Jew that sins is a Jew that does not wear tefillin. Karkafta deloi manach tefillin. Which, by the way, just practically, according to some Rishonim, it means a Jew who never wore tefillin. Hence the avodah that the Rebbe had before the 1967 to get Jews to wear tefillin, because he used to say that even if you just accomplish the fact that they're no longer called a Paisha Yisrael Begufan, that they're not sinning with their body. So an example of a Jew sinning with his body is a Jew who doesn't wear tefillin. Okay. Then the Gemara says, Paisha Umas Oilam Begufan. What's an example of a non-Jew who sins? So it doesn't say tefillin. Amirav ba'avera ba'arayis. It's averas with that part of the body, the bris milah. Arayis. Sexual immorality. So, it's interesting. The worst Jew is someone who doesn't wear tefillin. The worst non-Jew is someone who does things that are inappropriate. Jews also can do things inappropriate. So I don't understand. Why is it that the worst Jew is a Jew who doesn't wear tefillin, but the worst guy is someone who does things that are inappropriate? Jews also do things that are inappropriate. And if a Jew does those things, that's not an example of the worst Jew. The worst Jew is just tefillin. What does it mean? Rav Tzaddik looks at it, and this is what we'll go through, that there's a barrier, there's a line called tefillin that a Jew can never go beneath. It doesn't matter what he does. He can never touch that area of being like a goyish sinner. There's an area that you shall not pass. And we'll see. Hadavar tzarachin. The question is, what does it mean? If the example of a non-Jew who sins is someone who does things in the world of arayis, of sexual immorality, then why is that not an example of a Jew who sins? It's not. We could do the averis just like they could do the averis. What's the difference? Why does the Gemara say the worst Jew is someone who doesn't wear tefillin? It seems like you can get a lot worse than that. So what does it mean? Levaris kol hanal. So let's explain. I don't know if we'll be able to get through everything, but we'll start. Kasev Rav Tzaddik b'Sefer David Tzaddik. Rav Tzaddik in the Sefer David Tzaddik explains. Tefillin is a symbol of one relationship that we have with Hashem. Tefillin hu ois de hishtadlus. It's a relationship that we have that's based on hishtadlus, based on action, based on effort, based on toil. It's a relationship that you have that you could build and that you could break. That's called the symbol of tefillin. Tefillin means that there's a relationship we all have with Hashem that's like tefillin. What's tefillin? It's a sign. What type of sign? That you'll work for Him. You'll do stuff. Practically, you'll do things. Hishtadlus. What does it mean? It's like an eved. In the times of the Gemara, a slave would have a badge on his hand to basically tell everyone, I belong to him. So no one tried to take me, no one tried to make me work for you. I have an owner. Tefillin is a man's way of showing the world, I have an owner that I will work for. Pasha, work for. My arm is actions, my head is thoughts. My thoughts and my actions are for God. It's a relationship that's all about what you do and what you don't do. Tefillin tell Hashem, and that's what women are able to do without the boxes. Tefillin means that there's a relationship with you have with Hashem that's all based on what I will do and what I will not do. And if I do those things, good. And if I don't do those things, bad. That relationship can be built and that relationship can be severed. That's called the relationship of tefillin. I call the Ratzon Hashem. What does this mean? Bir advaravu. So anytime it's not the quotations, it's Yossi talking. Bir advaravu. Shekol echad ve'echad. Mi Yisrael yesh le'dveikis im HaKadosh Baruch Hu hatzluya va'imedis im b'chirasei hatayv. Every Jew has a relationship. This is the relationship that we judge most people based on, which is your relationship with God is based on what you do and what you don't do. That's called the relationship of tefillin. In boicher b'toiv, tefillin is all about action. Tefillin is not about tefillin. How you doing? You good? Tefillin in boicher b'toiv. If you choose to do good, mekayim mitzvahs b'oroi, and you're a good Jewish boy and you're a good Jewish girl and you mekayim Torah mitzvahs, harehu mizdabek im HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You have a relationship with Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu karev elav, and Hashem will be close to you. But that relationship of tefillin, which means it's a relationship that's completely based on your actions. If God forbid you choose to live a life that's distance from Hashem, and you choose to live a life that is against the way of Hashem, you could destroy that relationship. Hisyachazu ben koinoi lebein boiroi hatluya b'maisim. This relationship, which is contingent, completely based on your actions. Hari b'daim liyachash ben ish le'ishtoi. This, says Rav Tzaddik, is described in the Svarim as a relationship between Hashem of a husband and a wife. As I told you, a lot of these things you've heard of, but to do it well, it's a whole sefer. Shedveikusam hu eidei b'chirasam. Right? Just like a relationship between husband and wife is completely action. You're not born married. You work on it. And if it works out, it's great. But it could also end in divorce. It doesn't have to be. It's not an inherent relationship. And therefore, that relationship, im yivcharu yichayim lachta keshet veikasu eidei gedushin, gerushin. But it could also sever. V'zel lashon Sefer Beis Yaakov. This is the Sefer Beis Yaakov, the grandson of the Ishbitzer. We know that Rav Tzaddik was a Talmud of the Ishbitzer. The whole world of Ishbitz is all about this. The Beis Yaakov says, Yesh kedushas kinyonis. There's a relationship that you have which is a kinyon, which can be acquired. Shedei maisa adam. It's based on what you do. Ki b'ameshe yisagel mitzvahs u'maisim tovim harbe. This relationship is completely in your hands. If you work on it, it could be great. Ayadam yiknal atzmi kedusha. You could become a big tzaddik. V'zois mechuna b'shem isha. This is called a wife. Yan ki kine isha gam kine de ma'isiv shekana li is ishtar. Just like a wife is something you have to work on. It's not inherent. It's not handed to you. You have to acquire it. U'b'kedusha zu. Now this relationship yesh b'mayla. It's great. B'amasher yigia kapov, because you built it on your own. Everyone appreciates something that you built. It's a relationship that you have with Hashem that's yours. No one else has that same relationship because no one else has done the exact same things you've done. That's a relationship that's very, very close to you. It's something that you've earned, but it's something you could lose. But says the Ishbitz's grandson in Beis Yaakov. This also could be lost. By definition, when you go into the store to buy something, you got questions. All shailas and amunah come from this relationship. All questions of faith, all doubts of whether this is going to work. It's all a relationship of a husband and wife. It's like a date. You see, you're thinking on the date, I don't know. And there's that creeps into you, and that's that feeling that you have as a Jew of, is Hashem there? Do I care enough? That's all coming from this relationship. This relationship is called a husband and wife. Now again, if you work hard on it, it could be the best relationship you've ever had. But you could lose it all. If the evil wins. Rav Tzaddik explains, again, just to run through this. Rav Tzaddik mevar lanu she'yesod ois tefillin. The concept of tefillin, tefillin is the mitzvah that symbolizes this relationship. If you had to pinpoint one mitzvah that brings out this relationship physically, it's tefillin. Tefillin, that's what a man, when he puts on tefillin, this is what he should be thinking of. I'm building this relationship. My hands and my thoughts are for you. I will do whatever I can for you. And by that, I'm going to build this relationship up. That's what the mitzvah of tefillin does. Shumeid alatzmai. Tefillin is like an eved that I'm acquired. I have an owner. I have that wife. It's the wedding ring. It's a Jewish man's wedding ring. That's what it is. Whatever Hashem says, that's what I'm going to do. And God forbid I don't want to go against Him because I don't want to lose this relationship. That's tefillin. Rav Tzaddik says that's why it says in the Megillah, Vikar is tefillin. Vikar means it's precious. It's not found everywhere. It's not a relationship that not every Jew has this easily. It's vikar, it's precious. This relationship of you with Hashem that's being built up in a proper way, it's precious. Not everyone does it. Practically, unfortunately, there are about 90% of Jews are not working on this relationship. And that's why it's vikar, it's precious. It's not something that not every Jew has it, Pasha. It's vikar. Besides for no goyim have it, but not every Jew has it. Vikar. Perfecting this relationship in a way of having a husband and wife in a healthy way. And he says, Vikar, Davizahu Yokar. Davi Yokar. It's not found all the time. He says also, this is why So we'll run through this. This is Yossi using these concepts to, because tefillin symbolizes this relationship of hishtadlus, of working. It's something you have to work on. You can't sit back. Tefillin is all about effort, and it's about making this relationship better and not letting it all fall on the wayside. The relationship that you have with Hashem with tefillin takes work and takes effort. He says, "Valpiza kasav Rav Tzaddik b'Sefer Dover Tzaddik." That's what Rav Tzaddik writes in the Sefer Dover Tzaddik. Levaratam lama imitzas tefillin noiges balayla b'Shabbos v'Yom Tov. Why don't we wear tefillin at night? Why don't we wear tefillin on Shabbos and Yom Tov? There's different pshatim, but what's the deep pshat? The deep pshat is because night is not a time to work. Night is a time to sleep. The whole Indian of tefillin, it's a relationship that takes work, it takes effort, it takes toil. It's a daytime mitzvah. It's not a nighttime mitzvah. It's not a Shabbos dika mitzvah. Shabbos, we rest. Ikar hachilik ben yoim v'layla, the difference between day and night, hu shezman shel yoim azman shel pula. During the day is a time of effort, it's a time of work. Masha'enki laylu zman shvisas hapoyel. Night is a time to rest. Tefillin doesn't work during a time of rest. Tefillin is all about that. You can't rest on the relationship that you have Hashem that's symbolized by tefillin. You got to work. It's not a nighttime mitzvah. It doesn't make sense at nighttime. That's not what night's about. Night's about sleeping. Night's about resting. Shabbos is about resting. Shabbos and tefillin don't really go together. He says like this. If you look in the bottom in the next paragraph, Amnam, Hayil. Now let's bring it back. We said the worst Jew is a Jew who doesn't wear tefillin. It doesn't literally mean doesn't wear tefillin. It means the worst a Jew can get is to lose this relationship. If a Jew who doesn't wear tefillin, it means the worst a Jew can get is he can lose this relationship. Because this relationship is all about your effort and your desire and your actions, as we've said, you could lose this relationship. And that's why the Gemara says, you want to know the lowest a Jew can get? He doesn't wear tefillin. You can lose this relationship. That's the Gemara's way of saying you will lose this relationship. But here's the aside. Rav Tzaddik says it doesn't just mean you don't wear tefillin. That might be what it means halachically, but the depth of that aside of a Poisha Yisrael Begufon is a Jew who doesn't wear tefillin. It means that relationship that is symbolized by tefillin can be lost. And that's the furthest a Jew can go. Elahu sug kloli l'chol ba Yisrael haporik me'olav ol malchu shemayim boicha bera. The Tzaddik is saying, the Gemara is telling us that the worst a Jew can fall, if you live mamish, God forbid, keneged Hashem, is you'll lose this relationship called tefillin. Amnon, in the next paragraph. And now here's the aside. See, I mentioned that I wanted to talk these next little bit about Ahavas Yisrael and deepening the understanding of another Jew. Most people, the reason why they have Ichsaron and Ahavas Yisrael is because they're just looking at tefillin. If you're just looking from the perspective of tefillin, then a Jew who doesn't wear tefillin, what's the difference between him and a guy? There's no difference. Like Rabbi Chavetz Chaim famously wrote in his Sefer Nidchei Yisrael and Machane Yisrael, he said the same thing, that he said, a Jew is like a soldier or a doctor. He says both. What is it if a doctor doesn't do medicine? Is he a doctor? If a soldier doesn't go out to war and he doesn't do anything soldiery, so what is he? You got to work. You got to do poil. Chavetz Chaim said you got to do poil. From the relationship of tefillin, if there's a Jew who doesn't live in the way of tefillin, then what's the difference between him and a guy? But we know there's a difference. And you're seeing now an astounding level of the covet of Klal Yisrael coming out through Jewish people, right? And where is that coming from? It's not coming from tefillin, because they don't wear tefillin, right? And you have these Jews who mamish live not in a way of Torah mitzvahs. I'm not just talking about the soldiers. There's a lot of them. Whatever they can. All of a sudden now, Meiser Nefesh for Klal Yisrael. So how does that work? So everyone's out, Pintaliyid. What does that mean? The answer is, there's something more than tefillin. Rav Tzaddik Mevar, Rav Tzaddik says, and this is the most important yesod, Sheish Oid Sug Kedusha. There's another relationship that we have with Hashem, and this relationship over the next few weeks will go into depth to understand in a deep way what part of the neshama it's coming from. There's another relationship that every Jew has, merely by being a Jew. Sheyesh ben Yisrael lebayre. And what is that relationship? Says Rav Tzaddik, Ois Bris. That's the Bris Milah. Again, it doesn't mean literally the bris milah. Women have this as well. But the mitzvah of bris milah is symbolizing a different relationship. You see, every mitzvah, when is a boy obligated in any mitzvah?
13.
A boy is obligated at 13 because they're old enough to understand and to choose. You see, from the world of tefillin, which is that relationship that you're building and trying not to lose, you have to be mature enough to choose it, right? You can't choose a wife if you don't understand what you're doing. But there's one mitzvah that we have below the age of 13, and not just below the age of 13, at the day of 8. Now, we'll talk maybe next time about Alpi Pnimius, why 8, but Alpi Halacha, day 8 is the day that the baby is healthy enough. It's the first day the baby is healthy enough to handle a bris milah, which means that we're watching the baby, and the Torah says the second the baby is healthy enough to go through the operation, seal it in his body that he's different. So how could it be that symbol is based on the relationship of hishtadlus? The baby doesn't know what to work on. The answer is, it's not coming from the place of tefillin. The ois bris milah is coming from a much deeper place. Says Rav Tzaddik, ois bris, the mitzvah of bris milah hu beterem yeda hanar. It's before the child is old enough. Moyes bara'u boicher b'toiv. It's before the child is old enough to choose to avoid evil and to choose to do mitzvahs. It's before the child is old enough to work on that relationship of tefillin. Shu oishel hayahadus. But the mitzvah, the bris milah, is coming from a place, it's coming from a relationship of yahadus, meleida mibetem, that comes from the way you are, how you're born. Meharoyan belishom hishtadlus, without any effort. And from this relationship, interestingly enough, it doesn't matter what you do. You can't build it up and you can't break it. And he says, right, the Gemara says, we'll talk on this, he'll repeat this later on. The Gemara says, what's an example of a Jew who sins? Someone who doesn't wear tefillin. What's an example of a guy who sins? Bris milah. And a Jew can't be poigim bebris. Why can't a Jew do an avera with the bris milah? The answer is, the Gemara is trying to explain how far a person could go. A Jew, the furthest you can go is you could lose that relationship of tefillin. But a Jew cannot lose the relationship that's symbolized by bris milah. A guy doesn't have it. Therefore, a guy can be poigim in that place called bris milah, but a Jew cannot. It's impossible. And therefore, the lowest a Jew goes is not poigim bebris. It's karkafta deloy monach tefillin. Says Rav Tzaddik, ki ze eine biyadeh. That relationship that you have, called bris milah, is not within your hands. We're going to talk later on, who is the tzaddik who symbolizes bris milah? You could already think who's the first one who had a bris milah at 8 days. Yitzchak Avinu. The Gemara says, Mashiach will come based on this. Mashiach is not going to come based on the relationship of tefillin. Because the relationship of tefillin, it's not shaykh. It's too hard. To have all of Klal Yisrael become tzaddikim in the world of tefillin, it's too difficult. The Gemara says, the Gemara in Shabbos, Taf Peiches, that there's one tzaddik who's going to help bring Mashiach, and that's Yitzchak Avinu. It's the Inu Yitzchak Avinu. Yitzchak Avinu would be the last person you'd think that would bring Mashiach, because Yitzchak is not about chesed. Right? The Gemara says, it's my favorite Gemara. The Gemara says, Avle Yadanu, Yisrael Akirenu, Ki Shimcha, Ata Shimcha La'olam Vad. So the Gemara says, what does it mean? The Gemara says an astounding thing. The Gemara says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes to Avram Avinu and he says, Banecha Chatu, your children sin. So you know what Avram Avinu says? Yimachu al Kiddush Hamecha. So get rid of them. Yaakov the same thing. He goes to Yitzchak, and Yitzchak starts fighting. Yitzchak says, the Banecha v'loi banai, b'ni b'chayr Yisrael, and he fights fighter, and he fights fighter, and he fights fighter. And the Gemara says, Hashem says, fine, in your zchus, I'll bring Mashiach. What's the pshat that Avram Avinu is saying, get rid of him? Avram's chesed. The answer is, Avram Avinu's relationship with Hashem was based on tefillin. That's what he lived his life. He personified his life based on tefillin. But that relationship, it's very difficult. Yitzchak Avinu is bris milah. Yitzchak Avinu is bris milah. The relationship of bris milah is inherent kedusha. Doesn't matter what you've done. It's irrelevant. You can't lose that relationship. And for that, therefore, Yitzchak Avinu, although he's din, but al pi din, he's able to fight and he's able to be poil to bring Mashiach. Because his point, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is what does it matter? So they've all lost their relationship with tefillin, but there's something more. And by the way, that doesn't mean that mitzvahs don't do anything. Mitzvahs, from the perspective of bris milah, don't create something. They reveal what's already there. You see, the more a Jew lives his way according to Torah and mitzvahs, the more you're revealing the inherent kedusha you have. It's not that the relationship of Bris Milah doesn't care about Torah and mitzvahs. It's that Torah and mitzvahs are not doing the same thing from the dimension of tefillin to the dimension of Bris Milah. The dimension of tefillin requires Torah and mitzvahs to create something, and without that there is nothing. The relationship of Bris Milah means there's an inherent kedusha that Jew already has, and therefore when he puts on tefillin and he puts on tzitzis and he says Shema, what he's doing is he's not creating something, he's revealing what's already there. Those mitzvahs are expressions of what is already in that foundation. So he says like this. By the way, that's also why there's such a big Indian at a bris that you daven when the baby's crying. Why? Because the baby's cries is this relationship screaming, this relationship of Bris Milah coming out. And therefore, there's a tremendous amount of schusim that could be nifal, that could be accomplished during that cry, because during that cry, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm no longer looking at you with that difficult lens of tefillin, I'm looking at you at that relationship called Bris Milah. So he says further, Afal pi shechet Yisrael, right? This, I mentioned this once at a Chassidish shir, that when you have these two Rabbonim, I mentioned there was Rabbi Weinberger and a Rav from Baltimore, I don't remember, he didn't mention the name. Sometimes you'll have Rabbonim that are very fiery, and they're kanoim, and they're screaming Shabbos, Shabbos, and if a Jew's mechal Shabbos, they'll yell, which is not good, but it doesn't accomplish anything. And if you ask them, what are you talking about? They'll show you Maimer Chazal that says that if you're mechal Shabbos, and you're going to Gehenna, there's a Gemara that says that even if a Jew sins, he's a Jew. So how do you reconcile these two things? So you'll have Rabbanim that'll live with one dimension and they're screaming that their whole life. And then there are other Rabbanim that scream from the other way. And they're not seeing eye to eye. And the answer is, Elu ve'elu divrei l'kim chaim. They're both right. They're both right. One is the relationship called tefillin. And from the dimension of tefillin, Shabbos, Shabbos. But there's something much deeper. While they're both right, the truth is the Ois Bris Milah is a stronger relationship. He says like this, Bir dvaravu. Yossi says, that which we've explained till now, that this relationship that you have with Hashem, which is based on your actions, and you could build this relationship, and if God forbid you choose to follow evil, you could lose this relationship, even though all of this is true. It's 100% emes la'amitai. This is the external relationship we have with Hashem. But every Jew in its depth, and as we'll explain next time, it's coming from a deeper part of the neshama. The other relationship of tefillin is coming from a certain part of the neshama that's the external part. That depth of the Jewish soul. It has a relationship with Hashem that is not based on your actions. And even from the perspective of a Bris Milah, even if God forbid you would live your life mamish keneged Torah u'mitzvahs, mave kol dvei kusoi mitzad chitzoni es chayiv. Ein biyad b'chirase lifgoya klal b'sug dveikas hashniya. You cannot touch that relationship. That relationship is still 100% intact. So when people say that through Averis you could sever, you cannot sever it entirely. It's impossible. You could sever the relationship of tefillin. You cannot sever the relationship of Bris Milah. Look at the Beis Yaakov. We quoted before Rav Yaakov, this is the Baal Tchelis, the grandson of the Ishbitzer. So he said that the first relationship of tefillin is called a husband and wife, which can be built, but could be broken. So he says, so what's the lashon in Tanakh to symbolize this relationship of inherent love that is untouchable, cannot be built, cannot be lowered? From this perspective, interestingly enough, there's no difference between you and Rav Chaim Kanievsky, right? The same way a parent would say, I love my children equally. And yes, when a child is difficult, it makes it more difficult on your life, but your love for him is no different. And the same way you'd be Meiser Nefesh for all of your children equally, so too this relationship that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has with all of us called Bris Milah, it's the same. You could have a Chiloni, and you could have a Chaim Kanievsky, and it's identical. Mamish identical from this perspective. And he says, look at the Beis Yaakov. Yesh oy kedusha atzmis. There's a kedusha atzmis, not a kedusha kinyanis, not a relationship that is purchased. A inherent kedusha. Mashahu b'toylada. Nikva belev kol Yisrael. That is engraved in the heart of every Jew. Gam shalom midas. Without thought, payelis boy lebal yifran midveikas ebaris barach. V'yinikras b'shem achos. This is a relationship that some Sfarim describe as a parent-child or a brother-sister achoisi. The Beis Yaakov has an amazing thing. He explains in this piece, Yossi didn't quote the whole piece, but the piece, Beis Yaakov is dealing with a weird parsha in the Torah, that Avram and Yitzchak constantly, when they go to Mitzrayim, are constantly telling Sarah and Rivka, tell everyone we're sisters. Again, the Pashup shot of the Pasuk is because it was dangerous to say husband and wife. But it's like, how many times does this not have to work before Avram and Yitzchak have to realize this is not a good idea? It doesn't work once, it doesn't work twice, it doesn't work 3 times. So says the Beis Yaakov, Avram Avinu lived his life based on husband and wife. The problem is, when you leave Eretz Yisrael and you go into Galus, and times get difficult, it's very hard to live by that. That level of tefillin, that level of husband and wife is hard. And Avram Avinu wasn't talking to Sarah necessarily. He was davening to Hashem. I'm going into Galus. For a short period of time, let's be brother and sister. Achaisi. For a short period of time, I'd like to tap into that relationship that's untouchable, to make my life a little easier. That's the depth of it. Hish mitzvah achas mikol shar mitzvahs habala galus me'ida al sug dveikazu. And there's a mitzvah that symbolizes that dveikus, and that called the bris milah. Shechukuka al etzem b'sari shel Yisrael shu kadosh l'Hashem, which is chokuk, which is sealed on his body, kodesh l'Hashem. V'aver shemenu ma'abed teilados. It's the part of the body that creates offspring, that creates doiris, because that's the point. The Messiah of Klal Yisrael is this. Not every child will excel in the world of tefillin, but every child will be perfect in the world of bris milah. Every child. Doesn't matter what they've done, every child. And as we're going to see, it's not like a regular piece where it ends. It's a sefer, it's like 300 pages. So I just have to pick a time when I want to stop. As we'll see next time, what happens in these tkufas, and you get all these WhatsApp videos, the good videos. You shouldn't see the bad videos. The good videos that everyone's seeing, that everyone's sharing. When you see a Jew who hasn't lived in the way of Torah mitzvahs, but and they're singing, Yisrael lo lefached, whatever all these things, and Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. Why does it make you smile? Because what you're seeing is the relationship of bris milah coming out. You're seeing that inherent kedusha that every Jew has coming out. And generally, as we'll see, it's not a coincidence. It generally comes out in the times of Mesiras Nefesh. It generally comes out when the going gets tough. Because usually, as we'll see later, there are times where the body is in danger and the neshama is in danger, where survival mode kicks in. And while generally the relationship of bris milah, people hide, and the Jews that don't live in the way of Torah mitzvahs generally hide that relationship. That inherent kedusha is hidden, right? It's hidden when you're eating pork, right? It's not coming out, because if it was coming out, you wouldn't do that. It's hidden when you're seeing things you shouldn't see. But when it's facing extinction, all of a sudden that part of the neshama says, enough, I am taking over. And that part of the neshama erupts. And that's sort of what happens. You have to understand, and we'll talk more about this, this is the depth of Ahavas Yisrael. You see, if you love a Jew based on tefillin, then you'll love tzaddikim. Everyone can love tzaddikim. It's not a big deal to love tzaddikim. What is it about, like the Oyev Yisrael, those Jews that love Jews, right? Those Rabbanim that love Jews, that they're able to look at a Jew who's never worn tefillin, never worn tzitzis, never worn yarmulke, and see something there. So people say, they see the potential. It's not that. They see the potential. And Lu Yitzhar, he never puts on a yarmulke. So there's no potential there. It's not that they see the potential. You understand? It's deeper than that. They're seeing the ois bris milah, that inherent kedusha that is stronger than the relationship of tefillin, which every Jew has. So he says like this. Maybe skip a little bit. Okay. Actually, let's run through it. I'll run through a few minutes. Bir HaMishnah ben Adarim al Piyanal. Is a Mishnah in Adarim. Anyone who's done Daf Yomi, remember these type of Mishnayos. The Mishnah says that if you make a neder that you're not going to benefit from anyone that has a bris milah, any person that has a bris milah, not a Jew, any person that has a bris milah, I will not benefit from. The halacha is you're not allowed to benefit from any Jew, even if they don't have a bris milah, and you're allowed to benefit from a guy, even if they have a bris milah. So you see from this Gemara that a bris milah is not defined on that procedure. A guy can have the procedure, he doesn't have a bris milah. A Jew cannot have that procedure, he has a bris milah. So what is it? The bris milah is that inherent kedusha, that kedusha atzmus, which, by the way, 8 days old. Yeah, that's the key. 8 days old. Yishmael had it at 13. Yishmael does not understand, and it enrages them. Yishmael, inherently jealous. The world is jealous of that relationship that we have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And they could try whatever they want. You cannot extinguish that flame. They could try whatever they want. The other flame is efshar. But the bris milah cannot be extinguished. They don't understand it. It's not something they could be masig. They can't be masig inherent kedusha. They have a bris milah at 13. So they could choose to be good. More often than not, they choose to be bad. But they don't understand that inherent kedusha of a Jew. So I'll just end with this. A couple lines later, before the Milah Hikeneged Binas Alev. Iker tachlis kol haTorah u'mitzvos bekum v'aseh b'shaval tasa. The entire objective of Torah mitzvahs, of a Jew, of performing mitzvahs and avoiding averis, nishtanet legamri, is completely altered. Im hu mabit aleihem mitzad ois tefillin or mitzad ois shamliel. It's completely different based on what glasses you put on. Do you put on the mitzvah of Milah glasses or the mitzvah of tefillin glasses? Mitzad oishel tefillin, from the perspective of that relationship of husband and wife, that relationship of tefillin. Iker tachlis kol haTorah mitzvahs hu ledabek es Yehudim HaKadosh Baruch. The tachlis of Torah mitzvahs from that relationship of tefillin is to create something. That's the purpose. Every time you do a mitzvah, you're thinking, I am trying to create something that's not there. Which, by the way, is hard. Very hard to do. It's very hard to create a foundation. I'm trying to make myself holy. That's all from the dimension of tefillin. But from the relationship of bris milah, the purpose of Torah mitzvahs is not to create anything new. It's to reveal externally what is already there. It's to reveal what is already found within every Jew. It's to reveal you're already holy. That's the difference. It's not to make yourself holy. It's to reveal you are already holy. I'll end with this. Rav Kluger, I mentioned this, the first line I ever saw from him. It's from the Sefer Divrei Chaminachas. The first line in Sefer Divrei Chaminachas, he says, there's nothing more impressive that you'll accomplish in your life than simply being a Jew. What that means is, every mitzvah you could do, it's all very nice. But it cannot create that relationship called bris milah, that inherent kedusha that every Jew has. All the mitzvahs that you're doing is just trying to reveal what you already are, which is inherently holy. Kadosh mi betem. Next time we'll talk about where this comes from, what part of the neshama this is coming from, how does it manifest itself in our daily lives, v'chule v'chule. But again, this helps for Ahavas Yisrael, because that's the key. The key of all this is Ahavas Yisrael. It's what Hashem wants from us, is to Ahavas Yisrael. If you love fellow Jews, then Mashiach comes, and that ends all this chaos. And the only thing that will actually give meaning to all of this is Mashiach. So to work on Ahavas Yisrael in a deeper way is to understand what a Jew is, not to try to look for in the perspective of tefillin with a magnifying glass. Oh, they do this, they do this, they do this. They say tefillah to death. It's not about that. It's to reveal what is already there that every Jew has. I will stop here. Pick it up.